Ginger Island is an endgame location devoid of society and filled with dangerous monsters. With that said, welcome to surviving 100 days trapped on Ginger Island. Please subscribe and enjoy the video. I woke up on Ginger Island on day 1. I immediately noticed a food bar, meaning that gathering food would be essential for survival. I walked over to my small chest of supplies, including a weapon, a fishing rod, tools, seeds, and some clothes. I put on my clothes, then headed into the forest, collecting my very first golden walnut and meeting with Leo. I then followed a floating fire upwards, collecting all the golden walnuts I could until I arrived at the volcano. There, I realized how incredibly underpowered I was, so I bridged over to the other side of the area before returning back to the beach. On my way, I made some goals for the video. Actually survive by never being knocked out by either enemies or starvation, unlock Mr. Key's walnut room, and become best friends with Leo. I then woke the turtle and entered my new home for the next 100 days. I quickly planted my crops and collected golden walnuts for the rest of the day, completing the memory room after midnight and falling asleep in the Parrot Express. When I woke up on day 2, I realized that I was slowed from hunger, so I had some ginger for breakfast and decided I had 2 main goals for the day. The first was to fish for a solid food source, and the second was to collect enough golden walnuts to rebuild my island home. So I watered my crops and got fishing. Amazingly, I caught just as many walnuts as I did fish, and ended up rebuilding my home much earlier than anticipated. So with lots of time to kill, I headed up to the volcano to try my luck, and by nightfall I was slowed from hunger and had to slowly inch all the way home. I had some ginger for dinner before heading off to bed. In the morning of day 3, I had some fish for breakfast and watered my crops before heading down to the beach where I broke all of the strange mussel stones. I then collected a bunch of ginger from around the oasis and met a strange old woman before clearing my backyard of gremlins and heading over to Leo's. He introduced himself and I left and wandered up to the volcano in search of walnuts as I wanted to unlock the quarry. I headed in, dodged the slimes at the entrance and chopped rocks for a while before eventually sprinting out as fast as I could, being chased by 3 slimes and a fire spirit. I barely managed to escape and finished the day by fishing in the frog's cave. On day 4, I watered my crops and grabbed some ginger before heading over to Leo's because I needed a hint for the location of more golden walnuts. The parrot told me to look in the north, so I headed up, got 1 walnut, but had to hastily escape as 4 fire spirits were running after me. I somehow got away with my life, so I returned to my farm and spent some time clearing the area out before fishing for food and walnuts for the remainder of the day. I collected some ginger and hit some mussel rocks in the morning of day 5. I then fished on the bridge above my home, then got a golden walnut from fishing at some bubbles on the main beach. I then realized that I only needed 2 more walnuts until I unlocked the quarry, so I headed into the volcano. I had incredible luck and got 1 from a stone and 1 from killing a slime, so I returned home deciding that I would unlock the island quarry the following day. And the following day, it was day 6, I decided it was time to finally unlock the quarry, so I headed upwards and paid up. There I cleared a bunch of space and heard a person yelling for help in a nearby cave. Unfortunately for them, I didn't ask, but I'm just such a great guy, so I returned to him with an explosive in hand, setting Professor Snail free. I cleared the mushroom cave and donated a bone to the professor before spending some time collecting the golden walnuts hidden in the area. Before long, night had fallen, so I wandered back to my farm, planted some taro roots, and headed off to sleep. In the morning of day 7, I watered my crops, collected some breakfast, and gathered a couple of coconuts before heading up to the quarry and clearing it completely. With my job well done, I put all the resources back in my chest and decided to head into the volcano in search of loot, a better weapon, and golden walnuts. I got an incredible drop of a mango sapling, which I was very excited about, but I got a little too greedy and almost passed out, managing to escape with 9 HP. I took no risks in going straight home and planting my mango sapling. On day 8, I was clearing out my beach of rocks and forageables when I remembered a note I had gotten with a big red X marked for some hidden treasure. I was very excited as I ran over, dug up some dirt, and collected my golden walnut. What was I expecting? I cleared out my backyard of slimes and headed to the volcano before realizing that I only had half health left, and maybe that wasn't such a good idea. Instead, I decided to fish for the entire day and even crafted a new chest solely as a food storage. On day 9, I woke up, collected some ginger, and realized that I really wanted to repair the resort for social interaction, but I needed 20 walnuts and I had 5. So I went over to Leo's hut and asked the parrot. He told me to open golden coconuts, but I didn't have a geode crusher, so I headed upwards with with no particular plan. But when I entered Professor Snail's tent, I noticed a quest board that told me to count purple flowers. I ended out with 21, but I assumed that there would be one in the locked areas, so I put in 22. It was risky, but I amazingly got it correct. Very happy with my success, I headed home. In the morning of day 10, I cleaned my beach and planted a mixed seed, before once again heading over to Professor Snail's hut to conduct a survey regarding the amount of purple starfish on the island. I ran around counting and ended out with 17, which turned out to be sadly wrong. I must have counted incorrectly, or there was one in the locked area. Disappointed, I headed into the volcano with the goal of getting a new weapon, but I simply got hounded by fire spirits the entire time and eventually had to run away because it was getting late and I was low on health. The first thing I did on day 11 was go out to Professor Snail's and complete the survey, luckily getting it correct. I then headed up and entered the volcano with the sole purpose of getting as close to the forge as possible, as well as get a new weapon. I only found one chest that unfortunately did not have a weapon, but I did end up getting all the way to level 3, boosting my confidence a lot. I returned through the areas and escaped with my life, finishing off the day by planting some taro roots. Day 12 begun with a visit to Leo's hut, before once again heading up to the volcano. The first level had a structure which was very strange, so I entered and miraculously the chest gave me a dwarvish hammer, upgrading me from a level 3 sword to a level 13 hammer. I decided to keep my old sword just as a remembrance. But the new hammer was a game changer. I could now basically freely walk around the inside of the volcano, ending any enemies in the area. With that, I made it all the way down to level 4 before returning home as it was getting late. Day 13 was a rainy day, so I foraged for a little before realizing that it was the egg festival. I am so sad. On my way to the volcano, I found a bird who flew away, dropping me an emerald, so I picked it up and brought it into the forest where I placed it on top of the pedestal. I then cleared out the entire quarry and donated a foot to the professor before deciding it was too late to head to the volcano and instead fished for the entire day. Day 14 was also raining, so I grabbed an amethyst from the bird and placed it on the pedestal. I then went straight up to the volcano with the goal of reaching level 5. By basically speedrunning through all of the levels and accidentally dropping all of my food in lava, I did end up making it and checked the goods that the dwarf was selling me. I noticed a very nice pair of boots that I really wanted, so I decided to save for them. Seeing as it was getting late though, I planted some pineapple seeds and headed to bed. I woke up on day 15 to see that my pineapples were ready for harvest, so I grabbed them before heading up to Leo's for advice on the location of walnuts, then went back to the volcano. There I managed to make it to level 5 no problem, but I still couldn't afford the new shoes, so I grinded for cinder shards for the remainder of the day. I realized that it was 10 PM by level 8, so I hurried through all the levels as fast as I could, and just barely made it home in time, at 1:50 AM. On day 16, I planted my mango sapling, then wandered up to the volcano with my cinder shards to buy the boots. I made it to level 5, but unfortunately, I still couldn't afford them yet, and I had terrible luck with the drops for the next couple of levels, only finally getting enough by level 9. And by this time, I decided just to head to the forge instead. When I arrived, I grabbed my 2 new golden walnuts, then went back down, wanting to save my cinder shards for now to purchase the new boots the following day. Day 17 was another rainy day, and when I found the bird in the forest, I placed the gem down, and I realized I only needed one more gem. I then headed up to the volcano to purchase the brand new shoes. It took me a while, but I eventually made it and bought them. Now with 6 defense, I was feeling really good. I went all the way back down and realized I could afford an enchantment for my hammer, but then I remembered that I needed a prismatic shard, so I just headed home instead. In the morning of day 18, after watering my crops and harvesting some taro roots, I headed to the forge with my 20 cinder shards and a prismatic shard, but unfortunately got haymaker. Completely useless. Disappointed, I headed downwards and realized I only needed 1 more walnut until I could unlock the resort. So I asked the parrot for some wisdom. Using my newly gained knowledge, I headed upwards and claimed the golden walnut that I still hadn't gotten. I then walked down to the resort ruins and paid the parrots all 20 of my walnuts. I spent the rest of the day exploring the new eastern area and the cave within it. When day 19 came around, I headed straight to the southern beach area where I fished for golden walnuts outside and did some fishing inside the cave. I also dug up a walnut across from the pier, and when I returned to the resort, I was disappointed to see it was completely empty. Instead, I went back to my farm to check my progress towards unlocking the walnut room, which wasn't great. So instead, I decided to dig up the quarry for bones, and on my way there, I noticed the resort filled with people. My first interaction for almost a month. I spent the rest of the day digging worms in the quarry and planting some taro roots. On day 20, I was clearing my farm when I got another treasure map. So I went over and dug up my golden walnut. I then decided that I wanted the island trader to come to Ginger Island. Unfortunately, I needed 5 more walnuts, so instead I walked up and spent the entire day in the volcano grinding for cinder shards as I needed them to re-enchant my hammer, which I got another one of, by the way. On my way home at around 11 p.m, I came across Mayor Lewis staring into a corner, talking to himself. I went to bed very disturbed. In the morning of day 21, I got my hammer and my cinder shards, then headed straight to the volcano to enchant my weapon. I quickly grabbed the remaining shards that I needed from enemies in the volcano, then headed up to the forge, placing in my prismatic shard and went for it. I got Bug Killer. Now I had 2 dwarvish hammers, one with Haymaker and one with Bug Killer. This was absolutely awful. I also realized that there was a code of some sorts behind the forge, so please tell me what this means in the comments. Back on my farm, I spent some time foraging on the beach, then fished for the rest of the day. I watered my crops in the morning of day 22, then headed over to Leo's home to ask the parrot where I could find some golden walnuts. It told me to help Man Intent, so I went to Man Intent, and Man Intent told me to do some panning. I don't have a pan. Instead, I returned to my farm and decided that I wanted to decorate the general area, but for that I needed wood, and unfortunately I didn't have any at all. So I spent the entire day chopping trees until I was exhausted. I watered my crops in the morning of day 23 and cleared my beach of debris. Then instead of decorating my farm, I decided to head over to the volcano in search of more cinder shards, as I wanted to get a different enchantment. I grinded there for a while before returning back to the beach to say hello to the people visiting the resort, and planting my new mango seed, which I had 3 of at this point. I spent most of day 24 decorating my farm. I began by building up a fence around my mango trees and putting some flooring down to make it look slightly better before moving on to my crops. I put a bunch of tiles down around them and even added a sign in the middle. Very happy with my work, I headed down to the volcano to grind for cinder shards. There I found a note telling me a bunch about enchanting, so I decided to make my weapons super strong the following day. But day 25 came around and I completely forgot about my previous plans. I instead ran over to the bird on the beach to collect the final gem, placing it on the pedestal and completing the puzzle, receiving me 5 golden walnuts. With my newfound treasure, I headed up and purchased the island trader, who offered to sell a banana tree for 5 dragon teeth. I didn't have a banana tree, and I really wanted a banana tree, so I grinded for the entire day in the volcano trying to get a banana tree. I got incredibly unlucky and ended with not even 1 more dragon tooth. On day 26, I ran straight to the volcano, hoping to get 2 dragon teeth for a banana tree. I managed to get through the entire volcano, killing every single lava lurk I ever came across, but still somehow managed to not get a single tooth the entire time. I went home that day very disappointed. On day 27, I woke up with an unbelievable amount of motivation to get 2 banana trees for my farm. I don't know why I wanted to, but I did. And I decided that I wouldn't stop grinding for the needed resources until I had them. So I ran over to the volcano and got grinding. Only a couple of days in, I got my first banana sapling, which I placed on my farm. But it amazingly took almost 10 entire days of fighting in the mines to get the next 5. Finally, on day 35, I exited the volcano at 10 p.m. with the teeth in hand, and bought my second sapling, which I planted on my farm. I decided that I would show all of my progress the following day. The following day had arrived, so I showed what I had been working on. The first thing was a massive expansion to the farm area, using seeds from the volcano and mixed seeds from cutting fiber. And the second was the 3 new dwarf hammers that I had gotten, and the 249 cinder shards that I had collected. I then had a proper look for the gems needed for forging, and I decided I wanted damage, crit power, and crit chance. So I spent the entire day back in the volcano grinding for gems, but I got really unlucky and returned empty-handed. On day 37, I watered my entire field of crops, then noticed that my first mango tree had finally produced a fruit. So I grabbed it and brought it over to Leo's, who loved it. This was great, as I could finally make progress to my goal of becoming best friends with Leo. The parrot then told me to dig near bones, so I ran over and spent the entire day chopping all of the rocks in the quarry, but to no avail. Disappointed, I returned home, and with nothing else to do, I cleared my beach of rocks and fished for the rest of the day. In the morning of day 38, I watered my crops, and realizing that I only needed a jade and an aquamarine to get a super strong weapon, I gave Leo a mango and walked up to the volcano. When I arrived, I got a treasure map, so I ditched my quest immediately and went to dig up my golden walnut. Once I got it, I grinded in the cave for the entire day, unfortunately to no avail once again. On my way home, I saw Lewis staring at the wall again. That's normal, right? But on day 39, I had forgotten about the strange man, as I had a brilliant plan. Since my pickaxe was so garbage, I would go up to the forge and make it stronger. Unfortunately, when I got there, it didn't tell me what it wanted. So I headed back, grabbed a bunch of random gemstones, and returned, but still nothing happened. But I didn't want to waste my time, so I just combined my rings. I then fished for the rest of the day until nightfall, when I headed over to the Pirate's Cove. Sadly, it was empty, so I decided to try some other day. Day 40 was the other day that I had been waiting for. After watering my crops, I spent the entire day chopping fiber for mixed seeds and fishing on the beach, before putting my stuff away and heading over. When I arrived, it was bustling with activity. I talked with a bunch of pirates, then got into a heated game of darts, where I managed to get all 3 golden walnuts the man had to offer. I had a look at their boat before having a little fish in the pond, then finally deciding to reluctantly head back home. On day 41, after watering my crops and harvesting my mangoes, I walked over to the volcano to look for either a jade or an aquamarine. I looked through so many metal crates, but unfortunately never got a sentry to drop me any gems. I had almost given up when I spotted one last crate hidden in the corner of my screen. I wandered over, curious on what it contained, so I broke it open. That never happened. I gave Leo a mango in the morning of day 42 before heading up to the volcano, not to grind for gemstones, but to use the ruby that I already had. So I went to the forge and upgraded my hammer. I then changed my mind about grinding for more gems as I wanted to try my new weapon, and during this time I managed to get 2 jades. I got through every single level, and when it came to level 9, I was hoping for a good weapon out of a chest. I got another hammer. After a while, I made it to the forge where I upgraded again and headed home very triumphantly. In the morning of day 43, I realized that I had 7 hammers in total, so that's a thing. The first thing I did was plant some taro roots and harvest some mangoes, then talk to Leo for a little while. I was then clearing my beach when I realized I had 13 walnuts, enough to unlock the Parrot Express, so I repaired it and spent some time flying around the map. I cleared out the entire quarry and planted some taro roots on my farm before realizing that my melons were almost ripe, so I could get the reward from the frog sometime soon. On day 44, after planting some mixed seeds, I decided while I wait for the melons to grow, I would head over to the volcano to both try and get a better weapon, as well as get an aquamarine for my current hammer. I made it all the way down to level 9 once again, and explored it for a solid in-game 3 hours, as I was confused because there was a button that pressed down, but didn't do anything. I headed home still wondering what it did. Day 45 was finally the day that my melon was ready, so after planting some taro roots, I gave it to the frog, who gave me 5 golden walnuts as a prize. Using my new riches, I decided to buy my mailbox, as I wanted to see what the townsfolk was sending me. And during my spam, I didn't realize that I'd been given both a pan from Willy and a geode crusher from Clint, which must have been part of the small mods that I was using. And it was a special geode crusher as well, as it could open up my golden coconuts. I ended with 1 walnut, 1 seed, some pineapple seeds, and a mango sapling. I then checked how many walnuts I had, and it turned out to be 94, just 6 away from completing my goal. Happy with my progress, I gave a bone to Professor Snail and headed off to bed. On day 46, after purchasing a tropical TV from the island trader and watching some 4K television, I headed to the volcano, deciding that it would be the final day that I would try and get an aquamarine. And if I failed today, I would give up. Luckily, I didn't have to, as soon as I walked in, I got my gem. And when I arrived at the forge, I upgraded my hammer for the final time. I walked away very happy with my new level 15 maxed out dwarf hammer. In the morning of day 47, I harvested some mangoes, then went to Leo's, where the parrot told me to look near bones. So I went to the quarry, and the first worms gave me 3 golden coconuts. And after grabbing my 4th, I processed them in my crusher. They ended up giving me a seed, a banana sapling, a hat, and a mango sapling. So I put on my new hat and planted my saplings. I spent the remainder of the day clearing my beach and planting taro roots. On day 48, once again desperate for walnuts, I walked over to Leo's and asked the parrot, who told me that 4 were buried on my farm. So I returned and spent the day hoeing every single remotely suspicious spot, earning me a bunch of walnuts. I excitedly wandered over to the door that told me that I was 98 out of 100, which was absolutely devastating. I went back to the parrot, but it refused to tell me anything at all, so I just cleared the quarry for the rest of the day. Day 49 was Sunday, so I grabbed some mangoes and gave one to Leo. I then decided for the first time ever to grab my pan and wander around the island looking for spots to search. Eventually, I found one in the quarry which gave me a bone, which was super exciting. I gave it to the professor and noticed that I was 1 bone off of completing both the snake and the bear. With nothing else to do, I spent the rest of the day opening some Omni Geodes. In the morning of day 50, I decided to head up and ask Professor Snail for a hint on where to find some bones. He said to look in the jungle, so I flew over and cut a single piece of fiber, which yielded me a frog, which I excitedly returned and donated, collecting my golden walnut. I realized how many I had at this point, so I spent the day grinding to level 5 in the volcano, where I bought the early exit, which may prove useful in the future. I then came home and fished for the rest of the day. On day 51, after watering my crops and giving Leo a mango, I went to the door on my farm, which told me that I was only 1 walnut off, but I had no idea how to get this final walnut. Completely lost, I walked over to Professor Snails, who told me to break some golden coconuts. So I shook a bunch of trees and looked in my chest, and eventually conjured up 4 coconuts, that after cracking open gave me a seed, some iridium, some seeds, and the skull that was the final piece to the puzzle. But it was nightfall already, so I had to wait until tomorrow. In the morning of day 52, after watering my crops and harvesting my mangoes, I headed up to Professor Snail's tent and donated the head. In return, he gave me 6 golden walnuts and a sapling, and the skeleton looked really cool on display. I went home and planted the sapling before finally heading over and opening the walnut room. I had a look through the prizes and decided on a couple that I wanted before activating Mr. Key's prismatic grange challenge. I went home and spent the day getting a bit of an idea on the items that I wanted to use, but I knew the grind that was ahead of me. I spent an incredibly long time on this challenge for 2 reasons. I needed almost 100 iridium ores for purple, and I needed almost 100 coral for red. So every day I would water my crops, collect some coral on my beach, then spend the entire day in the volcano grinding for iridium. I also gave Leo a bunch of mangoes, increasing our friendship a lot. And finally, on day 71, I grabbed the final coral that I needed, completing 100 items for every single color, until I checked my journal and realized that I had run out of time. It was no longer there. I was absolutely devastated, but nonetheless decided to continue on. I first showed off my fruit tree farm by giving the monkey a banana and Leo a mango, getting the new friend achievement. I also showed the coffee that I had gotten from my hot Java ring. Still very sad, I headed over to the walnut room to see any new challenges I could start, and I found the prismatic grange challenge right there. I could just restart it and ship all of my items after all. I ran home incredibly happy that my time hadn't gone to waste and threw my items at Mr. Key, collecting my 35 key gems, but decided to spend them tomorrow. On day 72, I harvested some taro roots and went over to the walnut room to start a new challenge. Sadly, there wasn't any I could do, and I had to wait 6 days until they would refresh. I decided to save my gems and instead headed back to my farm, where I fixed up my fruit tree farm and had a talk with Leo and cleared out the quarry. I then asked Professor Snail where to find the final snake bone, and he told me on my farm, so I decided that I would search for it the following day. In the morning of day 73, I grabbed some pineapples and mangoes before exploring my farm in search of worms, which I could dig up and get a snake bone. I ran around the entire area and found absolutely nothing, so I returned to the professor, who had absolutely no more information for me. So I wandered back and eventually found a worm. I dug it and it gave me absolutely nothing. Disheartened, I gave up. But I was reignited with motivation on day 74, so I spent the entire morning searching for worms once again. Surprisingly, I found absolutely nothing, so I decided to instead head over to the mines and speedrun all the way down to level 9, where I got 3 golden coconuts out of a chest. Happy with my loot, I emerged from the volcano surface and returned home. And by day 75, I had a bit of a schedule. First, I would harvest and water, then search the farm for any worms, and when I inevitably found absolutely nothing, I would wander to the volcano, where I would speedrun all the way down to level 9, get something decent from the chest, emerge onto the surface, then take the Parrot Express back to my farm. And on day 76, I did the same thing again. Harvested, searched, walked to the volcano, speed ran to level 9, got another golden coconut somehow, emerged from the depths and returned home via the Parrot Express. In the morning of day 77, after watering my crops, I headed over to the walnut room to check how long I had left to wait, which turned out to be only 1 day. So I excitedly performed my routine of checking the island, grinding to level 9, getting a chest, emerging from the depth, then returning home. Excited for what challenge Mr. Key had in store for me. Day 78 was a sad day. I woke up and harvested my crops, then went over to Leo's to give him a mango. That was when we had a talk on the beach with Linus and Willy, who convinced Leo to return to the mainland and stay in Pelican Town. This was really sad, as I could now both not complete my goal, and I would be alone on the island for the rest of the video, other than the people who came to the resort. And then I remembered about Mr. Key. I wouldn't be alone after all. And even better, he was offering his prismatic grange again, which I was happy about, because it was one of the only challenges that I could complete. I spent the rest of the day in the volcano, getting to the top level and deciding to begin the grind tomorrow morning. On day 79, I began by collecting some items for the easier colors and placing them in a chest. I then headed over to the volcano to get certain gemstones, copper ore, and most importantly, iridium ore, as purple was the hardest color. I grinded like this every single day, collecting colored items for Mr. Key. And finally, on day 91, on the literal last day of the challenge, I picked up my items and headed over to Mr. Key's. I deposited them, then collected my 35 new key gems, which I decided to spend on an exotic double bed and a hat, as I really didn't need any of the other prizes, and I just wanted to flex. I then bought 2 more double beds with the cinder shards I had gotten from the grind, and placed them all in my home. I personally thought it looked absolutely brilliant. On day 92, after doing some farm work, I walked over to Mr. Key's to see if there were any new challenges that I could complete. But unfortunately, neither of them I could do in the time I had left. So I instead cleared out the quarry, returned to my farm, grabbed my pan, and went to the quarry again just to get some garbage. Very sad. In the morning of day 93, I was met by a bunch of mail, so I spammed through it all, then returned to Mr. Key's Walnut room to see if he had changed the available challenges, but he hadn't. When I was walking back to my farm, I spotted some bubbles in the ocean, so I decided to spend the entire day fishing in that single spot, since I hadn't fished for a long time. I found it a really relaxing way to spend the day. Day 94 was a rainy day. I started by harvesting my pineapples, blueberries, mangoes, and bananas before deciding to spend the day in the volcano. I ran all the way through, and by 9 p.m. I had made it to level 9. I opened the chest hoping for a weapon, but instead I got taro roots, which was a disappointment. I ended up returning home by 11 p.m. I harvested some taro roots on day 95 before realizing that I had more than 60 of them. So I did some farm work and walked over to the island trader where I bought the island skirt for some reason. I was kind of dripped out though, you can't lie. I was looking through some of my other chests when I found 16 golden coconuts. So I spent the day until nightfall getting them all opened. In total, I got 5 skulls, 10 iridium ore, 3 seeds, 2 banana saplings, 5 pineapple seeds, a mango sapling, and some taro tubers, which I decided to deal with tomorrow. In the morning of day 96, I completely ignored my responsibility of planting the seeds and instead cleared out my beach and looked for artifact spots, as I still didn't need the final bone for Professor Snail. So I asked him where to find it, and he still just said on my farm. Very useful. I then chopped all of the rocks on my beach, as I had a new small goal for the rest of the video. I would sell everything that I didn't need on day 100 and see how much I made. I then spent the rest of the day in the volcano grinding for a stronger weapon. I made it to level 9 by 10 p.m, but got nothing good from the chest. I made it to bed by 1:50 a.m. On day 97, I wanted to continue on my grind to make as much money as possible on day 100. So I harvested everything on my farm, then fished on my beach for the entire day. I did the same thing on day 98 and 99 before the big day had finally arrived. And it was finally day 100. I sold all of my fruits that I'd been growing over this time, my taro roots, my fish, then finally planted the last of my saplings. I made over 300 grand that night. Thank you all so much for watching. Because you made it this far, you are contractually obligated to subscribe. I know we just hit 5k, but you know, 10k looking kind of juicy though. Anyways, I'm going to be streaming almost every day after this video goes up, so go follow me if you want to. Link in the description and maybe in my comment as well. Okay, bye-bye. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, please. Also like, smash like, 100 likes. I mean, 1,000 likes, not 100. I mean, either way is cool. Okay, bye.